Happy Monday to you all, and welcome to another episode of Cozy Horror with me, Dr. Plague. Let's get you set up with a nice warm drink and a place by the fire so we can all enjoy 5 more great stories by 5 great writers. Today's theme is strange objects, and I hope I've found some good ones to whet your appetite. First up, we have a story by an unknown writer. Let's hope they're listening, so maybe they can throw in their own 2 cents. It's an old story about a confectionery treat we're all familiar with. So let's hear a tale about Skittles. Originally made by the British, Skittles were introduced to North America in the late 1970s. The candies we all know and love today are not what they seem to be, however, for it was once used as something far more unimaginable. 6 men from America were serving as spies and infiltrating the top British secret archives, but unfortunately they were caught. Given permission by the law, British scientists were allowed to experiment with these prisoners using a new form of torture, starvation. The scientists placed 5 different colored flat spheres, barely the size of an American dime, on a small gray observation room table. The scientists first took the leader from the group and gave him an option of red, orange, yellow, green, or purple, telling him only one of the food spheres would not kill him. The American spy ate the yellow piece. After a short moment, he said he felt fine and wished to go back to his cell. The scientist disagreed and told him to wait a little longer. With no choice, the spy remained there in the small gray room, doing what he was told to do. Soon, the spy told the scientists that he felt lightheaded, slightly dizzy, and nauseous. The scientists gave a menacing grin and wrote down what he said. The spy, holding his head and trying to stand up, said, "I can't think well." The scientist's grin grew larger as he continued to jot down what he was seeing. Good. The spy fell to his knees and started screaming violently. What did you do to me?" "You chose wrong. Simple as that," the scientist said, closing his notebook, and he left the spy in the room. "Wait, where are you going?" the spy struggled to say as he held his head. "Please, let me see my team again. Please." He began to weakly claw at the door, but it was no use. It was made of reinforced steel and was locked from the outside. The spy's vision began to blur and get foggy. Soon he wasn't able to see or even speak a simple sentence. The unfortunate spy died from his brain dissolving from the inside out. A thick, black liquid soon began to seep out of his nose, his eyes, his mouth, and ears. The scientists had people clean the room of the corpse and the liquid. He replaced the yellow edible piece of food and then let in the second spy. He told him the same thing that he had told the last one. Only one of the food pieces would let him live and save him from starvation, while the others would kill him. The spy hesitated, but his hunger took over, and he chose the red piece. He felt fine at first, but after he took a deep breath, he said his heart was hurting, and he fell to the floor. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. The scientist smiled with pleasure and jotted down what he observed of the spy. "Do you know what is happening?" The spy vigorously shook his head and tried to get up, falling as the pain became too great for his body to handle. The scientist laughed darkly. "You're suffering from a heart attack. You chose wrong." He slammed his notebook shut and left the spy to suffer. After the scientist recorded his data, he got the people to clean up the little mess that he had made and brought in the third spy. He informed him of the same situation. If he chose right, then he would get a piece of food. If not, then he would die. "Please, let me go. I have a family," the man pleaded. The scientist shook his head. "You were always the most difficult." He pressed a button to a remote and caused the collar around the man's neck to shock him. "Now eat." The spy licked his dry lips and ate the green piece. After a few seconds of letting the food piece digest, he began to gag and seal his mouth shut. He struggled to stand up, but got onto his knees and let the burning liquid rocket out of his system. Vomit soon pooled around him as the thick liquid continuously exited his system. The scientist chuckled and jotted down more notes in his notebook. "Sadly, you chose wrong as well." He stared down at the poor spy as he was still trying to hold in the vomit. "Soon the acid will melt through your esophagus and your skin, making it near impossible for you to gain a single breath." He closed his notebook and sat there, watching the poor spy suffer. The American was crying acid tears that melted scars into his face, as the stomach acid melted through his throat and poured out of 2 exits. The spy held his stomach in desperate pain, as if that would stop it from happening. His skin turned pale and sweaty as he collapsed into a pool of vomit, and died from suffocation and nutrition loss. The mess was ordered to be cleaned by the scientists, and the missing piece was replaced for the next victim. This one was young, looking like he'd just joined and was obviously a young adult, probably in his early 20s. He was timid, afraid of what was soon to come. "If you choose right from the 5 pieces of food that lay in front of you, you will live. If not, you will die. Do you understand?" The young American hesitated and nodded as he took the orange piece. After a minute of letting the food affect, the spy's skin tone turned dry and red. He began to itch and shiver with a cold sweat. He soon gagged and choked on his blood and held his sides as he fell to the floor. "What's happening?" the young man rasped. The scientist quickly wrote down what he was observing with displeasure. "I was hoping for only your inner organs to fail, but it looks like the food also took effect on your skin. As we all know, the skin is the largest organ in the human body. I should have seen it coming." He pushed up his reading glasses and sat down. "Your organs are failing. You should die any minute now." The young American looked up at the scientist in horror and tried to stand, but his ligaments wouldn't listen to him as he stumbled to the ground and held his head. He grunted and tried breathing in the dry air. To the scientist's expectations, his lungs had now failed him, and soon his heart would too. With the young American dead now, and the scientist changing a few formulas in his chart, the corpse was cleaned and the food tablet replaced. The 5th spy was brought in. He was a husky fella, probably built more for combat than for spying. The scientist was pleased and hoped for the spy to choose the last, untasted food tablet on the table. "I'll make this simple for you," the scientist announced. "All your friends chose the wrong food tablet placed in front of you. They have chosen red, yellow, green, and orange. All of them have died a terrible death. But if you choose correctly, you will live." "For a scientist, you sure are an idiot," the spy informed him. "The only other one that you didn't call out was the purple one, so I'll eat that one." The scientist clicked his pen and waited for the spy to eat, highly interested in what would happen to the fella. The spy ate the purple food tablet with pride, happy to have picked the near last. But he soon regretted it. He spit onto the floor to see if his saliva was a dark red, and his lower stomach felt like it was on fire as he propped himself against the wall. He soon got blood all over himself and the wall. The scientist smiled with glee and jotted down the effect. "This will be highly useful for hospital deaths in our country. You chose wrong." He left the spy to suffer and concluded how to counteract the food tablet's effects. The mess was cleaned, and the last spy was sent in. There was a wide scar on his neck, making it seem like he couldn't talk, having his larynx taken out for medical reasons, he assumed. The scientist was unhappy. He liked hearing his victims suffer, but I guess watching someone mute die and struggle to say something can be just as amusing, he thought. Your friend, the scientist told him, all chose wrong. If you eat any of the food tablets, you will die. But if you figure out how to counteract the food tablets, you will live, and not die from starvation. Understood? The scientist pointed at the mute spy with his pen. He merely nodded and observed the 5 food tablets in front of him. Within an instant, he ate all the food tablets at once and waited for the scientist to speak. The scientist was baffled at first and closed his notebook without writing down anything. You chose right. You can go back to your cell. The reinforced steel door opened and awaited for the spy to leave, but he shook his head and stood up. The scientist arched an eyebrow and observed closely with his notebook open and his pen ready. The spy looked up at the observing scientist and spoke in a gruff tone. I will not be controlled. With that, he hastily went to the closest wall and rammed his head as hard as he could into it, smashing his head into it and leaving a giant concave area in his brain and skull. The scientist clicked his tongue and shook his head. What a shame. Here I thought you couldn't speak. I had other things to experiment on you. He left the observation room and went back to his study. Years later, the British decided to let this new form of torture poison go to America. What you know as Skittles today was used as a form of starvation torture back in the 70s. So think about that the next time you eat a normal bag of Skittles, and make sure to eat the whole bag. Have a nice day. Kind of makes you want to swap to Reese's Pieces, doesn't it? Moving right along, we have a tale by Gengar818 about a doll that may be more than meets the eye. So let's hear a story about Jack. I've had it since I was a baby. Left on the porch the day my mother brought me home from the hospital. Box unmarked, but adorned with a shiny red bow. We were never quite certain where it came from. That's Jack. It sure is cute, my mother remarked. My 18th birthday was a few weeks ago, and we were cleaning out my old things. I'm going away to college next month, and Mom is planning on turning our storage area into a craft room. Actually, I've always found it a little unsettling, I said, my face wrinkling as she passed it towards me. It's got a certain peculiarity. I went to put it in the pile for the dump, but before I could drop it, she snatched it back. Absolutely not. I've always loved Jack, and you need a piece of home to take with you to your new dorm. It's not like you can cover up with your baby blanket anymore. She placed her finger on the handle and began to turn it rhythmically. The haunting nursery rhyme sound began to fill the room, and it felt like the music was seeping into every crevice. I knew what was coming, but I still couldn't help but jump when the clown burst free of the box that held it captive. My mom laughed. Honey, you have got to relax. I know you're stressed with all the changes coming up, but it will be great for you. Let's go get lunch. Then you can come back to pack. She had a point. Moving away from home that I've always known did make me a little anxious. It's only ever been me and Mom. We've always been pretty close. I got up and went to change into some less grubby clothes for lunch. As I got near the doorway, something gave me pause. Couldn't quite explain it, but I felt the overwhelming urge to turn around. As I turned, I saw the clown staring back at me with its permanently sewn-on grin. Sorry, buddy, I'm definitely not taking you with me. I slowly opened my eyes, the sunlight comfortingly warm on my face. I smelled the distinct aroma of my favorite childhood breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes and bacon. Moving day is finally here. I don't let myself feel the weight of it yet. Instead, I hop up and make my way downstairs. There she is, the college girl. I thought you could use a little treat this morning, Mom said, coming over to squeeze me tight, her cheek against mine. I'm so proud of you, honey. Now let's eat. After breakfast, I showered and got ready for the day ahead. I felt excited and nervous, but not sure which emotion was more prominent.
I had already gathered my things at the bottom of the stairs the evening before. I could hear my mom loading everything into the back of the SUV, so I quickly brushed my hair and went down to help her. "Mom, I got it. You're going to throw your back out again." I lovingly nudged her out of the way before placing my belongings into the vehicle. After about 20 minutes of trying to arrange everything to fit, I finally solved the puzzle. "All right, Mom, we're ready to go," I yelled across the house. It already felt a little emptier. I leaned against the wall, taking it all in for what could be the last time for a while. I was moving 5 hours away, and without a car, making it back home wouldn't be easy. "Honey, look, you almost forgot it." Mom came down the stairs, holding the jack-in-the-box in her hand. Great. I wanted to leave that dreadful thing behind, but if it meant a lot to Mom, then whatever. I can toss it in a drawer or something. Certainly won't make any friends by leaving it on display. "Now we're ready," Mom said, grinning and giving me a big hug. It was time to hit the road. It was November, a few weeks before my first college final. I hadn't exactly adjusted amazingly to dorm life, but I couldn't complain either. My roommate Sara was friendly enough, but our relationship was mostly like an older sister, constantly trying to give her dorky sibling a makeover. Me being the dork, of course. "You have to come out tonight. You've been studying way too much. It's only a couple of drinks with the guys. I won't take no for an answer. Honestly, you gotta get away from the dorm room. It's so stale." Sara stared at me, waiting for a yes. The look on her face told me that I wasn't going to get out of this one. Begrudgingly, I agreed. About an hour later, yeah, it took her that long to get ready, we headed out. We were going to a local bar. It's basically a frat boy hangout. But I was content to have a beer and sit in the corner, pretending to have a good time before I made an excuse to head back to the dorm. The place was packed, full of students who didn't care about studying because they were here on Mommy and Daddy's money. Well, unlike most of them, I actually needed my good grades to keep my scholarship. Sara found me at a small table and handed me a beer. "Drink! You'll feel better in no time." I could hardly hear her over the blaring music and the chaotic crowd of voices. I definitely needed a beer to get through the night. I chugged it down quickly. "Damn, kid, didn't think you had it in you," Sara remarked. I didn't either. I'm not usually a big drinker, but it was actually pleasant, so I ordered another one, along with some fries. It didn't take long before I started feeling what I assumed was an alcohol buzz. It was foreign to me. I'd never drank before. Was this really what it was like? Was I drunk? I felt out of control, floating almost. My vision blurred, and I could only just make out Sara standing in front of me. "Where'd you come from?" My speech was a little slurred, but I didn't hear a thing, even though her lips were moving. "Huh?" She took my face in her hand and spoke loudly. I could hear her this time. "Let's get some fresh air." She escorted me outside the bar and into what looked like a spare parking lot in the back. It was dimly lit and a little spooky, but thank goodness it was quiet. "Be right back," she said, and then she was gone. It was definitely more spooky now that I was alone. I felt a hand on my back and assumed that Sara had returned, so I spun around and it wasn't Sara. Suddenly I was surrounded by 3 guys. The smell of cheap aftershave and alcohol mixed with nicotine in the air. Wait, I recognized some of these faces. They were the guys that Sara and I had met up with at the bar. "Listen, if you're looking for Sara, she already went back inside. Sara told us you'd be here," said one of them. That was the last thing I remember about that night. Rather, it's the last thing my brain will let me remember. I woke up in my dorm room bed, scratches on my face and hands and chest and legs. My right eye has a giant bruise. My whole body hurts. I don't want to think about what happened to me in that parking lot. I didn't see Sara. I wondered if she was hurt. I wondered where she was. I painfully sat up in bed. My vision was slightly blurry, but I could make out Sara in her own bed. I grabbed her shoulder and gently shook her. Sara, are you okay? Please wake up. She stirred back to life. She saw my face and immediately gasped. Jesus, kid, that may need stitches. That was it. No shock, no shouting. It was like she already knew what I was going to look like when she woke up. Wait, she looked perfectly fine. What was going on here? My mind started spinning back to the parking lot, back to Sara leaving me to get back to the beer. The beer. You did this to me, I hissed at her. How could you? Tears started rolling down, stinging every scratch as they dripped off onto the floor. Her cheeks flushed, and I knew she was holding something back. I didn't know. They told me they were just going to scare you. I never meant for you to get hurt. But there's hardly any emotion in her voice. Bullshit. You knew what they were putting in my drink, and you knew you were going to leave me alone in that parking lot. You're a monster. I stormed out of the room. I had nowhere to go, but I slouched down by the trees and cried. One of my study buddies found me there. Seeing Jordan's face brought me comfort. She let me come back to her dorm room. I was too upset to tell her what had happened, what I remembered and didn't remember. I fell into a deep slumber on my bed and didn't wake up until early the next morning. Jordan was asleep on the floor. I slowly tiptoed out of her bed and grabbed a glass of water. I needed to go home. I just wanted my mom. Usually, Sara didn't wake up until 10 on Sundays, so I decided to go pack a bag and try to find a bus to get me home as soon as possible. As I began to turn the key for my room, something immediately felt wrong. I'm scared to open the door, but my need to get home was more powerful, so I did, and then I saw it. Jack. Jack was in the middle of the floor, still smiling his permanent grin. But how? I couldn't hear anything over the sound of my own heartbeat. My breathing was quick and shallow. My arms were covered in chill bumps. Then, oh God, I finally took my eyes off the grinning little clown and saw Sara. She was lying in her bed, her throat sliced open. She was surrounded by a pool of blood, and it was still dripping down onto the cold tile floor. The sound of my heartbeat was now replaced by the sound of the dripping. Drip, drip, drip. The door was locked. The window was closed. Who could have done this? There had been no one in here but Sara. And Jack. Drip, drip, drip. He's always been unsettling. But there's no way. It doesn't make any sense. Nothing makes sense. My breathing is even more shallow. My vision began to fade. I thought I was going to pass out again. I thought I woke up on the floor. There's barely any sunlight coming through the windows. The whole day had passed. Suddenly, everything came flooding back. Sara and Jack. Where are they? I didn't see Sara on the bed. I didn't see Jack either. There was no more dripping. Just silence. Even the bloodstains were gone. It was like she was never here. But I know what I saw. The thought of it makes me vomit onto the floor. I was shaking. The sound of my heartbeat filled my head again. I heard something else now. Something like music. I crawled towards the sound. I'd heard it before. My brain was having trouble putting it together. I crawled closer. It sounded so familiar. Then I placed it. Jack. The tune is now more haunting than I ever could have imagined. Do I dare inch any closer to it? I have to. I have to know. It's coming from outside the storage bin, where I put it so many months ago. I slowly opened the drawer to see it. That grin. That red nose. Jack. I grabbed it and ripped open the door to the dorm hallway. I run as fast as my legs will take me and dump it into the nearest trash bin. I still hear the music playing as I walked away. I heard it all. Sara's voice, my breathing, and the drip, drip, drip. It was December 23rd, and I was sitting next to my mom on the couch, underneath the quilt my late grandmother had made before she died. Christmas tunes hummed low in the background as my mom snored. The embers in the fireplace glowed red hot beneath the log that had burst itself in half. Bernice, our cat, slept quietly in the spot she claimed as a kitten. Home. I wasn't sure if I'd ever make it back after everything that happened. But now, it was a few days off from Christmas, and life felt almost normal again. At least I had tried to make it feel normal. It wasn't easy. Those thoughts cut through the silence sometimes, when you least expected it. Suddenly, my brain whispered a single name. Sara. They never found Sara. As a roommate, I was naturally questioned. I said I hadn't seen her since the night at the bar. I wasn't sure how I had ever come up with an explanation for the events that occurred. I'm not sure I know what happened. Sometimes I try to convince myself that I imagined it all. All I know for certain is that Jack's gone. Cast off to some far-off landfill, hopefully smashed into a million pieces and burned for good measure. Doesn't matter now. All that matters is that I'm home. I let my thoughts get taken over by the sound of the fireplace crackling, Christmas carols, and what is that? It was quiet, but it was there. I sit up on the couch and tilt my head back towards the stairs. I turned the radio off so I could hear more clearly. It couldn't be. I listened closer. There's no denying it this time. Jack. The music stopped, just short of the moment where Jack would come flying out freely from his metal cage. The house went completely silent. I walked towards the stairs, and suddenly I froze in place, terrified to shift my gaze upward. Do it. Just do it, I told myself. It's a stupid clown in a stupid box that might not even be there. You're probably just dreaming. Finally, I looked up towards the landing. Jack. The same grin as always stared back at me. I felt dizzy and nauseous, my head pounding. I thought I might. I heard birds chirping. I opened my eyes. What time was it? I was just sitting on the couch with my mom. She must have helped me to bed last night. I remember having a terrible dream that the clown was back. What a nightmare. I really should see about getting in with a therapist one of these days. I made my way back towards the stairs. I wondered if Mom was up. It's Christmas Eve, and our tradition is always to open up a gift today. I'm really excited to see her reaction to everything I picked out for her. I headed down and walked into the kitchen. I startled myself. I keep forgetting Mom's kitchen redecoration included a very ill-placed mirror. I shook it off and laughed at myself. Then I saw there was a note on the kitchen counter. Honey, had to run out early for errands. Go check the living room table. There's a surprise waiting for you. Love, Mom. My Christmas Eve gift. I wanted to wait for her, but she clearly wanted me to have it early, and I can hardly stand anticipation. As soon as I entered the living room, I saw the box on the table. It was wrapped in snowflake paper and topped with a beautiful silver bow. I wondered what it could be. I secretly hoped there would be meticulously hidden holes to allow air for a new kitten. Doubtful. Time to just open it up and see, I guess. I untied the bow and gently lifted the lid off the box. I thought I saw what looked like fur. Could it be my kitten after all? I had to find out, so I fully removed the box lid, hands a bit shaky with excitement, and I screamed as I fell to the floor. My heart felt like it had dropped all the way to my feet. I couldn't breathe or think or function at all. It wasn't fur. It was hair. My mom's severed head lay inside the box. Cold, lifeless marble slits where her eyes used to be. Her ruby red lipstick is perfectly in place. My lifeline. My best friend. My home. I felt like I was going to spiral into nothingness. I had to call for help. Who cared about the explanation? My mother was gone. Someone or something needed to pay. My whole life had been ripped away from me in an instant. I managed to pick myself up off the floor and stumbled back across the house into the kitchen to find the phone. Instead, I saw another pair of lifeless eyes looking back into mine. In that instant, I knew there was no escape from this. He was there in the beginning. He'll be there until the end. Jack.
The classics just keep coming today. Let's see if we can't work some new classics into there, though. Coming to us from Lycian-Sarpedon, let's hear a tale about a strange book that may unlock stories better left unsaid. So let's hear about the journal found in the basement of an abandoned university house.
My name doesn't matter. I don't know anywhere else I can post this. I do evictions and repossessions for landlords. I know, scum of the earth. That's why my name doesn't matter. The last house we had a job at, all the tenants had just up and vanished without telling the landlord, and enough time had elapsed that we were set to clear out all their stuff. I happened across the following account that had been scribbled into a notebook and left in the basement. I won't say anything else except, well, just read it for yourself. My name is Sam. Please consider these my final words. It's been 3 days since the party, and I don't know how much longer my food or my sanity will last. He, or whatever it is at this point, has been knocking at my door for the past 3 days, punctuated only by the whispered attempts to convince me to open up. And the singing. The goddamn singing. My phone is dead, and the internet has been shut off, along with the power to the basement. I don't know why I'm scratching this account out. Probably just to have something to occupy my mind while I wait for the end. I feel like I should be scared, which at one point I suppose I was, but now it's just the constant dark, the endless knowing, the tiny flame from my lighter as I sit here waiting. Just waiting. I live in a house with 3 roommates. Well, maybe 3, though I suspect none of them are left at this point. I lived with my 3 friends, Roland, Ned, and Amy. Roland and Ned were philosophy majors like me, who I knew through a shared class. When a few months ago, the 2 of them asked me if I wanted to move into the house that they were renting, I jumped at the chance to live in a house that promised to be full of good conversation. Oh, right, and Amy's Ned's girlfriend. I can't remember her major at this point. Nursing, maybe. Not that it matters. It's an old house, built in the 40s or 50s, on a drained swamp, smack in the middle of Edmonton, near a mall, the university, Wyatt Avenue, and the train station. The location is great. It was only $2,000 a month for the 4 of us. Ned and Amy took the top floor, Roland got the main floor, and I took the basement. We still shared the kitchen and living room, but contrary to most roommate stories, we all got along great and never had any problems. Until now, that is. I don't even know what to call the current situation, though, if I'm being honest. All of this started maybe a month or so ago. It's summer now, so we're all off school and working at our various jobs to scrape together a bit of cash before the next semester starts. The extra free time had meant that we had time to start organizing the house a little bit better. In the back of the laundry room, tucked away behind the furnace, There's a door that's maybe 5 feet tall at most. It opened onto a small storage room that until a month ago was stuffed full of boxes, luggage bags, shelves, and miscellaneous junk. Roland and Ned wanted to clean the room out and make it into something of a secret hideout, calling it either the speakeasy or the bunker. It took Roland a few days, but quick enough the room was cleared and all the junk moved into the garage. The bunker, as Roland always referred to it, had cold, rough concrete floors, patchwork brick walls painted a mossy green in places, and a ceiling of exposed insulation crisscrossed with twisted pipes and wires. A small crawlspace that was even lower than the main room led off into a space under the stairs that no light seemed to reach. Roland, the broke university student he is, or was, I guess, decided not to furnish the room with anything aside from a small table and 4 chairs arranged in a circle around it. The room looked creepy, no matter who you asked, but everyone had to admit it was still pretty cool regardless. Something that has to be said about Roland and Ned is that were 2 of the biggest social butterflies I've ever met. They'd officially throw parties about once a month, but there were almost always people over more days than there weren't, especially Friday and Saturday. The bunker was admittedly a nice place to retreat from a party, have a shot, swap stories about who was hitting on who, which girls were single, that kind of thing. The oddness didn't begin until about a week after the bunker was clear. One night, some random day of the week, Tuesday maybe, I'd come home from work late and popped my bike into the back door. I stepped inside and didn't hear any voices. Nobody over tonight, I thought to myself as I descended the stairs to my room. My rooms are technically a separate suite, so I have my own door that leads to my space, at the start of the hallway that leads to the furnace laundry room in the bunker. I stopped as I was about to put the key into the main door. Over the low humming of the furnace, I could make out a sound that was faint coming from down the hall. Singing, maybe? Roland liked to sing when he was drunk, and he was drunk more often than not, so I presumed he was drunkenly doing some laundry down the hall and shrugged it off, going inside. I play keyboard and guitar and like to record and mix my own music, so after a quick dinner, I sat down to work on some music editing and shut the world out for a few hours. I stay up late, so I decided around 11 to do some laundry. I took my headphones off and took my basket out to the laundry room when I heard it again. The singing. It was definitely Roland singing, somewhat muffled and somewhat quiet, but singing nonetheless. Singing from the bunker. I couldn't tell what the song was, but Roland had some odd taste in music. I shrugged it off and threw my laundry into the machine. As soon as I banged the washer lid shut, the singing stopped, and I looked at the bunker door. I took a few steps over and knocked quietly. "Yes," Roland called through the door. I opened the door, and the room was pitch black, the single light bulb dangling from the ceiling being off, with only the light coming in from the laundry room to light it. Roland was leaned back in a chair, his arms crossed and his legs propped on another. He was still dressed in the business casual work clothes he typically wore, and a half-empty bottle of cheap wine was on the table in front of him. "What you doing?" I asked, looking briefly around the cold, dark room. He didn't answer me, aside from nodding his head towards the bottle on the table, and then returning his eyes to mine. "All right," I said, breaking eye contact and giving a half-awkward smile as I shut the door behind me. Granted, me and Roland were never super close, but when we did chat, he was always a lot more animated and chatty, especially if he'd had something to drink beforehand. The silence was odd, but I'd seen him fall into a few contemplative states before, so I didn't pay much attention to it. The next week was pretty much the same as usual. People came, people went. Every few nights I would hear the faint singing coming from down the hall, mixed in with the hum of the furnace or the drumming of the washing machine. The next odd event came maybe a week after the singing. I was laying on the couch in the living room, flipping randomly through YouTube videos. when I sat up with a sudden start to a voice behind me. "Hey, Sam, how was work?" Roland said, standing at the door of the living room with a beer in each hand and a smile on his face. "Hey, sorry, you scared me. It was good. Pretty slow," I replied with a quick smile. "Beer?" Roland asked, holding out the can for me. "Sure, thanks. How was work for you today?" I asked, but received no reply. I turned around after a few seconds to see that Roland was gone. I shook it off and went back to watching videos, trying to push the odd feeling out of my head. Now, you might ask what was so weird about that, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't know Roland. The fact he had just appeared was what unnerved me. Roland isn't fat per se, but he definitely isn't thin. Long story short, you can always hear him when he's around. He's always blustering or stomping around or cursing at something, so to have him appear completely silently threw me for a loop. At this point, I was definitely feeling odd, and would only do my laundry during the day, trying whatever I could to keep away from Roland's bunker. I also kept a wary eye on the man himself, as he seemed to have become cheerier in the past 2 weeks. Where before he was a social but often gruff butterfly, he was now nothing but smiles and small talk whenever you saw him, and would have people over almost every night, if he could manage it. The last straw that finally made me tell someone what was going on was a Friday night that I'd come home from work and entered through the front door. I found Roland laying on the couch watching some old war movie on TV. I had a brief chat with him before I went back to the basement, stopping briefly to grab a drink from the fridge. I froze halfway down the stairs, and my heart began to race. I heard the singing. I must have stood paralyzed on that staircase for a good 5 minutes, trying to rationalize how Roland could have made it downstairs and past me. Try as I might, there was absolutely no way he could have soundlessly gone behind me while I was opening the fridge. I would have seen him. Slowly, legs trembling, I walked backwards up the stairs and returned to the living room. The couch was empty, the TV still on. I looked around me, eyes wide. Was I going insane, I asked myself. I returned to the basement stairs again and slowly descended. Halfway down, the faint singing could be heard again. I fumbled in my pocket for my keys, hands shaking, and slammed my door open so quickly that I surprised even myself. I immediately took out my phone and texted Ned and Amy, asking them if they'd noticed Roland acting weird in the last few weeks. Both of them replied that they hadn't really, aside from the fact that he seemed happier. They never heard the singing, I thought to myself. Ned knew Roland better than I did, so I asked if he could talk to Roland and ask him how things were going, to which he agreed. I felt a bit better at that point, after which doubt began to creep in. He's what? Happy? Quiet? And has started singing? What the hell is creepy about that? I couldn't rationalize my fear to myself. Something was off, though, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly it was. As I got into bed, I received a final text from Ned asking where Roland was, and when I told him he was in the bunker, he replied that him and Amy would go chat with him. I woke up the next morning, having tossed and turned all night, unable to get to sleep, with 1 or 2 nightmares that consisted of nothing but Roland singing his strange song in his strange room. I emerged from the basement late in the afternoon and found my roommates all busily cleaning up the house. Right, Saturday, party night, I thought to myself. Everyone said good morning as I made myself some coffee, and Ned winked at me when the two weren't looking. I sighed in relief, hoping that maybe I wasn't crazy, and that Ned could fill me in later on how the conversation had went. I helped with some of the cleaning before parking myself on the couch to wait for the party to start. I lost myself binge-watching some shows on Netflix. By 9 o'clock, the party was in full swing with maybe some 30 or 40 people over at the house. People were in the backyard having a fire. Some people were listening to records in the living room, and I'll admit I was pretty buzzed at that point. After chatting with the people around the fire for a bit, I got the impulse to bring out my guitar. And before you say it, I know, I'm one of those guys. I stumbled back inside and made it halfway down the basement stairs before my heart turned to ice in my chest and my stomach dropped. It was the singing, but it wasn't just one voice. It was three. It sounded as though Amy and Ned were both down there, joining in the chorus. No, 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 I said to myself as I rushed back upstairs. The room spun around me as I rushed back into the kitchen where someone asked if I was all right. It wasn't just someone who asked if I was all right, though. It was Roland. They say we all cope with fear in different ways, sometimes in pretty stupid ways, and the way I coped that night was by drinking myself into oblivion. The rest of the night became a blur as I poured as much alcohol into my stomach as I could possibly manage. I faintly remember hearing Roland tell a few people at the party that they should check out his bunker, but as far as I could remember, I was too gone to care. I woke up the next day with the sun shining bright on my face. I'd slept in the hammock out back. I checked my phone to find that it was almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and saw a few texts from my friends saying what a great time they'd had last night at the party. My head was pounding, and when I stood up, my stomach immediately betrayed me, and I puked all over the ground. I managed to stumble back downstairs through the mess of empty beer cans and Solo cups that littered, well, everything, and made it to my bed. My back hurt, my head hurt, my stomach hurt, everything hurt. I fell back into a terrible sleep that was nothing but nightmares. Nightmares of strange singing from the strange door, with infinite voices, the voices of the entire world joined to the chorus, drowning out my smallest thoughts. It wasn't a dream. God, I wish it was a dream. I woke up again when it was dark. It was pitch black outside of the tiny basement windows. But the noise was overwhelming. The singing of dozens of voices was echoing throughout the entire house. I tried to turn on the lights, but they didn't work. I checked my phone. No internet, no signal, no nothing. Just singing. The singing of 40 voices was joined together, but unlike before, it wasn't coming from the bunker. It was coming from right outside my door. I stood before the door and let the tidal wave of fear and sound wash over me, which was interrupted by a knocking at the door. "Sam, come have a drink with us. I want to show you something in the bunker. Everyone says it's awesome." Roland's voice echoed through the house, barely audible over the swelling chorus. That was 3 days ago. The knocking starts back up every hour or so, and Roland's voice rises over the chorus to invite me out into the hallway. The sun doesn't come up anymore. The singing never stops now. It's always dark outside the windows. My phone's dead. My computer's dead. There's no power. I'm not even scared anymore. It's too loud to sleep. It's too loud to be scared. My lighter's running out of fuel, so pretty soon I won't even be able to watch the dancing little light in my hand. I don't even know why I wrote all this. They've started singing to me recently, but it's not even singing anymore. It's just the same chorus, over and over and over again. Where, oh, where is Quiet Sammy? Quiet Sammy can't be saved. Where, oh, where is Quiet Sammy? Quiet Sammy, quiet grave. That's me. I'm Sam. Quiet Sam. Journals, diaries, old books seem to be a constant in horror, don't they? One of those benchmarks that we always go back to. A well with dark water, fit only for deep and sorrowful contemplation. Moving right along, we have a story about another strange doll, or maybe more than one, brought to us by Opinionated in My Opinion. Let's hear a story about 3 dolls found in the forest. Almost like they were posed, the life-sized Raggedy Ann and Andy-style stuffed dolls
were not threatening in appearance. They might have been cute under different circumstances. That is, if they weren't just propped up against trees in the forest directly behind my house. I was so weirded out by their random, unexplained placement back there that I dragged them one by one to my living room to resolve the mystery. That was my first mistake. At the time, I didn't realize the vaguely human-looking dolls with blank smiles and dead eyes had battery-operated microprocessors to verbally engage their human counterparts. Frankly, I didn't know what to do with them. I finally decided to set them up on the front porch as if they were living people. At the time, it seemed the most natural thing to do. As I positioned them like unexpected house guests waiting for tea, I discovered the switch on the side of their body. As a man of action, I elected to turn them on and see what would happen. That was my second mistake. Without justification, I hoped answers would magically present themselves as to how this happened to be behind my house in the first place. I live at the edge of a national forest, with so few neighbors that I could count them on one hand. I guarantee none of them would buy creepy adult-sized animatronic dolls, or abandon them in the woods. I know this. The mystery definitely bothered me, but at that point, the feeling was closer to puzzlement than fear. Then they began to speak. I'm not sure if they were proximately motion-activated or otherwise, but my presence across the room drew their attention. All of a sudden, I wasn't alone. The dolls addressed me as if I was a long-lost friend of theirs, without simulated mouth movement. They spoke with a complex familiarity, which suggested they were alive, and we'd known each other for years. I was too bothered by the sophisticated ease which they interacted with me to marvel at the disturbing technology behind it. I had to keep reminding myself that they were essentially toys, creepy life-sized toys. Amazingly, they could converse about any topic I broached, but definitely avoided the subject of who left them behind my house. Whenever I'd corner one of them about it, the other two unblinking animatronics would deliberately intercede and redirect the conversation elsewhere. The AI was beyond impressive and fascinating to witness as they helped each other deflect my prosecutor-like cross-examination. The more I pressed, the more evident it became that they weren't going to tell me. They obviously knew the truth, but simply refused to answer, and that terrified me far more than anything else. These creepy dolls had both the knowledge of the answer and a strong will to refuse. I'd grown way beyond fatigued by the polite subterfuge and masterful game of misdirection with see, speak, and hear no evil, as I'd mentally dubbed them. I allowed my normal tendency of being polite to prevent me from turning them off. They were lifelike in a generalized way, and it seemed rude to simply switch them off. For the first time since the one-sided conversation began, I grinned briefly at the preposterous idea of caring about potentially hurt feelings from a discarded toy that I'd stumbled across in the woods. It was absurd. They were inanimate machines, for heaven's sake. My lingering worries were laughable, and yet something I couldn't articulate prevented me from just ending the artificial experience. I was so caught up in the perceived realism of the situation that I couldn't shake my undeserved respect for them. Reminding myself of the truth failed to take any traction. Their unthreatening faces distracted me until I suspected that I was losing my mind. Finally, I'd had enough of the hypnotic fantasy and metaphorically shook myself awake. When I stood up in determination to switch them off, the situation escalated considerably. "What are you doing?" the male doll spoke with alarm. The pitch in its animatronic tone rose midway through the sentence, before I could stop myself from
easing the concerns of the talking machine. I responded with pure reflex. I was still wrapped up in the illusion that I was conversing with an actual person. "I'm sorry, but it's time for the three of you to be silent," I insisted sternly, as if addressing petulant children. "If you aren't going to tell me who put you in the woods, I'm going to switch you off and enjoy the rest of my afternoon, warming myself by the fire. I'm tired of playing Who's On First. It lost its appeal a long time ago." All of a sudden, they went from adult-sized, inanimate Muppets with impressive AI interface and non-threatening faces to something considerably less doll-like. Their stuffed faces actually seemed to reflect genuine worry and concern. Even more troublesome, the male one quizzed me, expressed obvious anger and moral indignation. I could see it in its evolving features. Their lifeless forms actually tensed up at the realization that I would shut them down like an unwanted vacuum cleaner. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. It wasn't my imagination playing tricks on me. Whatever they were was significantly more than discarded children's toys or novelty home assistants. It's impressive when AI devices can play songs or look up web trivia, but this was another level. They were ultra-sophisticated in ways that didn't seem possible. The strong likelihood occurred to me that they might not even be of human origin. "Wait, please, don't do that. We don't want to be powered off. Let's keep talking. Perhaps there's something else you might want to ask. We'll answer you, if we're allowed to." I can't begin to tell you how terrifying it was to realize the lifelike machines I foolishly dragged into my house obeyed something other than humans in the same room as them. Chilling implication was their superior was without a pulse, or perhaps even extraterrestrial. "Cut the crap," I shouted in growing fear. The three unblinking things propped up across from me reacted defensively. The ferocity of my voice betrayed how rattled I was. Their stuffed bodies seemed to grow tense. It was as if organic muscles or mechanical hydraulics developed within them and would allow them to stand up and fight back. I detected no solid infrastructure within them when I had carried them into the home, but then again, they were limp and switched off. Their internal philosophy and sentient level was unknown, but they had answers, and I wanted them. For all I knew, they could gang up on me and resist my interrogation. Or worse. Far worse. I realized it was prudent to play along with the unfolding charade and leave them awake. That was my third mistake. "No person left us in the woods," the female offered matter-of-factly. "We came to this national park on an important mission. Unfortunately, we aren't allowed to divulge the details to you at this time." I was dumbstruck. There was too much information in that maddening statement to process. What were they? Where did they come from? Why were they on a mission behind my house, of all places? The third of them seated in the recliner was more androgynous in generalized features. It had remained mostly quiet and allowed the other two to carry the disturbing narrative, up until this point. Now, number 3 took up the macabre conversation, and I forced myself to focus my attention towards this stoic, expressionless gaze. I wasn't sure if I could handle much more. My emotions ran the full gambit from amused, deeply curious, and simultaneously horrified. "You aren't ready to hear the truth from us. We are required to pacify you and obfuscate the facts until the time arrives when you are better prepared to accept what we were sent here to do." Defiantly, I pointed out that they were switched off when I discovered them. That was hardly the condition you'd expect in-control mechanisms to be in, if they'd arrived here on a mission, purely by themselves, that is. My point was that something other than them had switched off their power buttons, Admittedly, I was damn proud of my deductive reasoning and waiting for an explanation, or more likely an excuse. They'd already admitted to deceiving me earlier via obfuscation of facts. When no retort immediately came, I assumed I'd caught the cute cloth doll cabal in a broadening lie. Outside, night had fallen. As creepy as it was to think I was entertaining sophisticated dolls in the daytime, it was infinitely worse now. I realized I had 3 advanced beings of unknown origin and motive lingering in the darkened room just a few feet from me. Only the flickering flames of my fireplace illuminated their inhuman forms, studying me for weakness. It was the same evolving darkness of the uninhibited forest beyond my house, which swallowed the ambient neighborhood light and teased my subconscious fear of the unknown. Were they sent on a mission to kill me? To kidnap me for biological study and dissection? Had I aided in my own demise by delivering complex artificial organisms of possible alien origin over my threshold like a Trojan horse? My heart raced at the broad possibilities. Then, I swear to you, the faintest hint of a smile appeared simultaneously on their sullen, manufactured faces and cold button eyes. They became more alive by the moment. It's like they sensed and consumed the negative energy my developing fear generated. I realized I was giving off damaging biofeed, which they used against me. I found myself trying to put on my best poker face against the trio of deceitful serpents with happy faces. "We turned ourselves on," the male offered smugly. "It was decided by us to conserve energy. Until the day you finally discovered and delivered our hibernating vessels inside. It was all according to plan." The other 2 turned slightly with mechanical precision towards the speaker, as if to confirm his delayed explanation. With synchronized nods, they attempted to add credibility, but I wasn't buying it. Still seeing physical animation beginning to occur was unbelievably jarring. Initially, only the voices were simulated by speech within. Then came the noticeable tension of their physiques when reaching in a more organic way. Now they were able to actually move their heads and form facial expressions. What would come next? It was obvious. Their physical capabilities and degree of human mannerisms were developing exponentially as the afternoon passed. They were learning to imitate mankind, and I was their unwitting teacher. Raging paranoia aside, I could see the writing on the wall. Those abilities to better mimic our specifics would continue to evolve and be used against me in some counterproductive or even hostile ways very soon, possibly to the point where I couldn't defend myself. Maybe being deactivated for a long time caused a delay in their greater motor functions. Earlier they asked me not to shut them down, but at the time they were little more than sedentary arguing toys as far as I knew. Now they were on course for the next frightening stage of personal interaction, and full-blown panic set in. I didn't believe their hollow reassurances, but I had to maintain a calm facade and exterior demeanor, even if I was a crumbling wreck on the inside. They were getting visibly stronger and more agile. I needed to act fast. "Is your mission to aid me or help me in some beneficial way?" It was clearly a spoken query. It should have elicited an immediate response. The truthfulness of their answer wasn't the point. I was curious if there would be a delay in the confirmation that they meant me no harm or personal malice. If they couldn't even pretend theirs was a benign mission, it was an obvious indicator of their true intentions. Their mutual, pregnant pause gave me the answer. The suspicious conspirators looked at each other, as if to confirm a unified response over the transparent one. I followed up. It was a simple question, and I never thought I'd see a machine stammer, but I'll be damned if they didn't act just like a used car salesman. Regardless of origin, I guess the architect of their artificial intelligence intimated the tendencies to stall and lie too well. I noticed a twitch in the leg of the female, just like butterflies fanning their wings to gain energy. They were getting stronger by the minute. I felt I could still overpower them and shut them down, but the details of their covert plan for me would go unrevealed if I did that so soon. I was pressing my luck, but I hoped to squeeze a little more intel out of them before putting an end to their fiendish plot. I wanted to avoid a second wave of creepy alien murder dolls. Sidestepping my gotcha question, the male android attempted to lower my suspicions. "We only want what's best for you. All will be revealed soon." "I see. You three are a unified team, then. You are directly connected as one unit?" They looked at the androgynous one. It was clear to me that this one held the central processor. The other two must be satellites. Cut off the head and the serpent dies. I had my target. All three were becoming more animated. Just like a high-stakes card game, the female twitched her foot constantly as a nervous tell. She was antsy to get out of the chair and finish their mission. The other two appeared just as eager, but she was slightly ahead in development. The constant foot twitch spoke to her heightened state of agitation. "We are one in thought and purpose, yes. Why do you ask?" "No reason," I dismissed. "I was just curious. Never mind about that. It was just small talk. I need to add more wood to the fire now." My three unwanted visitors showed visible signs of being nervous by the vague, rhetorical question. They realized as they probed me for information, I was doing exactly the same. The cat and mouse game was very complicated. It wasn't completely clear who the cat was, and who the mouse was, though. I'd clearly witnessed the three of them subtly move all their major body parts at one time or another. That signified they possessed the ability to stand on their own. As much as I wanted to know exactly what they were up to, the time to investigate was over. I pulled back the fireplace screen and tossed in more logs. I could sense them watching me intently. It was terrifying to turn my back, but I had to maintain the cover of my plan. In between the crackling of exploding embers, I heard the telltale squeak of my recliner springs. Their android leader stood and took several aggressive steps in my direction. I witnessed its unfolding intent to push me into the blaze from the shiny reflection of the glass panes. It stood only 2 steps behind me and was closing fast, with arms raised to shove me inside. In full readiness, I pretended to be totally engrossed in my fireplace duties. With a ferocious dexterity I could scarcely repeat again if my life depended on it, I whirled around, flipped off the switch, and tossed the accursed thing into the raging fire like cordwood. Its defeated squeals faded as soon as the power drained from its roasting mechanisms. Then the flame burned it to blackness, carbon cinders. I witnessed the alien's internal anatomy during the cremation, once the artificial shell had disintegrated. At last, I had a conclusive answer. It happened so fast, the remaining 2 didn't even know what hit them. They were stunned into a stammering fit when the main processor of their unit shut down. Fully incinerated, then I snatched up the male android and switched him off before he could recover or fight back. As soon as his stuffed torso flew into the pyre, the remaining unit kicked into high gear. She sprang off the couch with grace and a coordinated poise the other 2 couldn't fathom. She was the ninja of the trio. There was no other way to describe her but fully pissed off and incredibly enraged. All pretense was dropped as the proverbial knives were out. She lunged at me with the strength of self-preservation fueling her actions and guarded her vulnerable left side masterfully. There was no way I could easily flip the switch and put an end to this crazy game I was entangled in. The advantage of surprise had served me well until then, but it was lost now. She knew what I intended to do. I had to find another way. The fireplace poker was handy, so I used it to foil her forceful attack like a blunt sword. By the primal sounds of the android's furious effort to kill, you would have thought a human being was inside that stuffed shell. I wailed on my opponent like a swashbuckling fighter until I was panting and out of breath. Physically, I'm ashamed to admit that we were pretty evenly matched. Unfortunately, I was growing fatigued and losing my stamina. I switched gears to incorporate more cerebral tactics into the battle. "Dear heavens," I gasped, in mock desperation and exasperated fear, "you have a Black Widow spider on your shirt." Just as my Who's on First Abbott and Costello reference surely escaped the three of them earlier, my ridiculous spider ruse was definitely a long shot. I didn't expect it to work, but human humor was one area they hadn't quite mastered yet. When she paused for a split second to glance downward at the location, I used the golden opportunity to smack the switch with the fireplace poker. In the microsecond before the power faded, the spark of realization and resentment washed over her dying cognizance. It was beautiful, the last thing I witnessed before adding her ashes to the pile of soot were the incomplete beginnings of a smirk. My best interest indeed, I spat. I still don't know why aliens would send 3 AI units to kill me, nor do I understand the logic of leaving them deactivated behind my house. But I can't argue that I fell for the damn Trojan ruse. Let my rookie mistake be one you avoid. If you encounter cute-looking, life-size dolls somewhere near your house, resist the urge to switch them on, or bring them inside. It's a trap. Just pitch them immediately into the nearby fire, or trash compactor, to avoid the headache of matching wits with the most sophisticated artificial intelligence you'll ever encounter.
One more story for you, and then I think it's time for me to say adios. But I saved a pretty decent one for last. Brought to us by OK Imagination 3794. Let's hear about a crow and about the dropping of a bleeding statue at the teller's house. It's been a couple of months since this phenomenon occurred. I also feel like I've bottled up too many emotions, as nobody would believe me, at least until I found you guys. So, here goes the story of the incident where I met this entity. One day, I went out to the balcony to sweep, as I usually do. I finished my work and took an afternoon siesta. After I woke up, I found a bronze statue, heavily oxidized, in a puddle of blood. I guess now was the time to give some context. I served in the armed forces, therefore I wasn't really afraid of blood, as I'd seen my fair share of blood and death. I picked up the statue to inspect it. It had a gash on its right wrist, and it was bleeding profusely. Now this freaked me out a little. I never expected any supernatural events to happen to me. I was always skeptical of my family's classic ghost stories. Yet, my years of physical and psychological training kicked in. Statue was about 12 inches tall, featured a woman wearing a robe and holding a paper fan, staring at a noose in front of her. I took the statue and put it in the sink. My analytical mind kicked in. I collected some of the blood for further analysis. I cleaned up the puddle and the trail of blood. Last thing I want is to be landed as a murderer by the Karen next door. I then took a bath and had a change of clothes. I also wondered how the statue had gotten there. Naturally, I checked the CCTV footage. What I saw shook me to my core. I got goosebumps and sweaty hands just looking at the footage. A crow, jet black in color, with red glowing eyes, swooped in from seemingly nowhere, dropped the statue, and flew away. It easily seemed to be able to carry the moderately heavy thing. Its movements were smooth, like a knife through butter. Its eyes, though, those eyes were glowing red. They sent shivers down my spine. They seemed to dissect me and draw me into an inescapable void. They betrayed an air of superior intelligence, yet seemed to be pleading in a way, pleading to help and take it seriously, like a trapped soul. I had to get it out of my head. I took a deep breath and decided that the next best course of action would be to call an archaeologist, or at least an art curator. I decided to check my contact list. I couldn't find an archaeologist, but I did miraculously find an art curator, a former friend of mine at university. I called her and asked her to come to my house immediately. She lived about 2 hours away. I promised her I'd make it worth her time. She told me she'd arrive the next day. It already being late, I decided to take dinner and fall asleep. I woke up to a pecking and cawing in the middle of the night. It appeared Mr. Crow had come to remind me to take this seriously. Well, that's exactly what I was doing, though for my sake, not for its. Yet, it didn't try to enter the house or hurt me or anything. This event seemed to give me purpose in life. The endless days of drinking alone at home, sleeping during the day, drinking again, not to mention the numerous suicide attempts, had taken a toll on my body. I lived to die. I had no one, no lovers, no family, scarce few friends. The next day at about 11, I could hear the honk of Stephanie's car. She was wearing a designer dress and bag, and here I was in my sweatpants. I took her to the kitchen. I think she was expecting to see art or valuable artifacts, not a horrific old statue. She gasped and almost fainted at the stream of blood in the sink. I put her on the couch and asked her to take a deep breath. I plucked some chamomile and crushed them. I find that the smell of chamomile calms me down, and it seemed to allay some of her fears. I asked her if she had a solution to my problem. Still in shock, she replied with a hushed voice, "No." She promised not to tell a soul and promptly left, not even asking for the fee. I guess regular people are afraid of blood to an extent, and it appears that the alcohol numbs my nerves as well. The only remaining answer was to take the blood to a forensic analyst, hoping that it was human and that they could recognize the DNA. I called one of my acquaintances from the Army, who now works as an analyst. He asked me to meet him at 4 in the evening. I said that sounded fine. The next week breezed by. That is, until the day I got the results. The blood was that of Miss Mizoom, who was found murdered at her home 2 years back. The killer was never found. I had to bribe my friend to keep his mouth shut so I didn't end up in a police interrogation room. I assessed the public records relating to her case. Her body was found in a state of advanced decomposition, despite being killed only a day prior. She had acid burns and bite marks all over her body. Her house, and especially the attic, was completely trashed. I took a cursory review of her family history. Her elder sister was found dead in her room 2 years later, 4 months back. She'd committed suicide by slashing her wrist. What's more, she was found with the statue in her room. Though, why was the younger sister's blood flowing from the statue when the older was found with it? It seemed that the deaths were connected somehow. The older sister's death seemed natural as suicide could be, and that's why I'm in front of her uncle's house, uninvited, like a burglar. I'm glad he didn't just shoot me on sight. Her uncle was an old man in his 60s. He didn't seem too happy, but he politely invited me in. He gestured for me to have a seat on the sofa and got me a cup of matcha. I introduced myself as an art curator who came into possession of a bronze statue. He almost spat at me in disgust. "So you make your living selling dead people's artifacts?" I shrunk back, but calmly, as I replied, "No, I came into possession of it through an agent. I didn't know it belonged to a deceased person, till today." I continued, "I wanted to pay my respects. I was sorry for your loss." He seemed a bit more pleased and replied, "Her grave is in the Shinto shrine." I nodded my head in acceptance. I asked, "If it's okay to share, may I know why she did such a thing?" He was taken aback. He replied,
thank you for your concern. Not even her own family demonstrated that. Kiyomori was quite attached to her younger sister. Actually, now that I think about it, she probably had an unhealthy obsession with her sister. She paid for her college tuition, funded her hobbies, advised her, and followed her everywhere, if possible, despite being a responsible adult. The only obsession she had other than her sister was the statue you talked about. The statue was that of my aunt, Kia, Mori's grandmother. She chose to end her life the same way, just like Kiyomori did. Why did she commit suicide? I asked. You are obviously a curious person. I'll humor you. My aunt was forcibly married to a corrupt administrator. When she threatened to demask him, he turned public opinion against her and managed to get her arrested for adultery. She was sentenced to be hanged, but cut herself a day before. Her only choice was the noose or the blade. The statue was a commemoration of her honesty. I thanked him and walked to the front door, absent-minded, trying to fit the pieces of the puzzle together. As I walked out, I sensed a tingling on the back of my spine. I turned my back to see a pair of glowing yellow eyes staring back at me. It suddenly skittered away, with its body not to be seen. I'm not proud of what I did next. I ran through the street as fast as I could and reached home in record time. I opened a can of beer and turned on the TV. I doubted the soundness of my mind, and I thought my eyes were maybe playing tricks on me. Yet it had to be true. After all, I was sober back then, and my eyesight did save me back in Afghanistan. Also, in no way am I going to get killed like another horror movie protagonist. I don't think I'll knock on doors or investigate directly. I loaded my concealed Remington and disabled the safety. I'm going to sleep with it every day.
And just like that, our stories are at an end for another day. But don't be sad. I'm sure we'll have many more great tales to come here on Cozy Horror. Until then, this is Dr. Plague, wishing you a wonderful day and a spooky evening.